Hey guys, it's Bradley again. So right now, as I'm recording this little intro segment to the podcast, it's already pretty dark outside my window. You know, there's passing car lights and all that. And here inside the Psi Chi Central office, everybody else they've already left a couple hours ago, but I'm still here, and I'm eagerly sitting by my phone because I've got an interview coming up in just a couple minutes. And the topic, it's just so unbelievably exciting that I couldn't bring myself to turn it down. So when I got this opportunity at 7 p.m. on a Friday night, I said, okay, that's totally cool with me. So I've actually been talking about this one like all day to people around the office, and from what I can tell from their reactions, I think you're in for a really great treat. Tonight, our topic is superhero therapy. I can hardly even say that and believe it's a real thing. And guess what? Even better, we're going to have this conversation with a person whose real-life origin story is every bit as inspirational as the origin story of your favorite fictional heroes. Allow me to introduce you to Dr. Janina Scarlet. In Ukraine, Janina Scarlet was just about to turn 3 years old when she was exposed to dangerous amounts of radiation due to the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. As a result of that accident, her immune system was severely weakened so that she couldn't even fight off a simple cold. She had frequent nosebleeds, and her health was affected in many long-term ways, such as she continues to get severe migraines that appear to be triggered by changes in the weather. When she was 12, Janina moved to the United States, where she struggled with symptoms of what would eventually be diagnosed as PTSD. School was tough for her. The other kids bullied her and called her just awful things, like radioactive. In a Self.com article, she says that she believed herself to be weak and broken. She considered herself to be a freak. But then something amazing happened. At the age of 16, she caught a showing of a film starring Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, and some others. It was the first X-Men film, and as you can imagine, she was particularly interested and inspired by a superhero named Storm who could control the weather. From that point forward, Janina began to see herself as a survivor instead of as a victim. And even more incredibly, she went on to become a clinical psychologist who practices integrating superheroes and other fictional characters into evidence-based therapy. Her goal is to help clients to become superheroes in real life. Dr. Scarlet works at the Center for Stress and Anxiety Management in San Diego, California. She is the author of multiple books, including one titled Superhero Therapy. She's also the host for 2 podcasts, the Superhero Therapy Podcast and the Harry Potter Therapy Podcast. It is my unique privilege to welcome Dr. Scarlet to the show.
Hello, this is Bradley at Psi Chi.
Hi, this is Janina Scarlet. How are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I am so excited about this one. So, would you like to start with just some fun kind of icebreaker questions?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, so let's do that, and I'll do them with you, I guess. That might be fun.
Okay.
So who is your favorite superhero? Is it Storm?
Yes, Storm is my favorite superhero of all time. I still would really love to see a Storm movie. I'm hoping one of these years we'll have that happen.
Uh-huh. Maybe that's too easy. If you had to pick a second favorite.
Ooh, traditional superhero or fictional character of any kind of fictional character?
Any kind.
One of my favorite characters is actually Snape from the Harry Potter series.
Nice.
I just think he's fascinating, and he is really complicated as a character. He's somebody that has layers of depth to him and is really interesting, and I think that is really driven by his core values and by his promises.
Cool. Well, I guess I would pick sort of a superhero, Phil Coulson.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
I love a character that has a good sense of wit and never kind of backs down. even when
Yes.
obviously everyone else has better powers than he doesn't really have any, but it's super cool.
He is super cool, and I love Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's actually one of my favorite TV shows.
So let's say that there's a Storm movie is finally coming out. Let's kind of let's create your ideal movie viewing experience for that movie. So would you want to watch it in the theater, or would you want to like watch it at your house?
Oh, you know what I would love to do is I would love to have it be like almost like a meetup for people who are into pop culture, maybe pop culture and psychology, just talking about Storm's origin story, talking about her character. So I would love it to be, whether it's at the theater or at someone's house, for it to include not just the screening, but also some kind of a discussion afterwards where people can talk about what they just watched.
Nice. Well, I was going to ask, would you want other people there?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times when we go to the movies, we definitely feel along with other moviegoers, like in Avengers Endgame. I think everyone's emotions were contagious, right, in a really wonderful way. And at the same time, I really wish that everyone in that movie theater, even though I didn't know most of the people there except for the people I came with, I wish that there was some kind of a discussion for what went on and how people felt about it. I wish more movie theaters would do something like that.
So do you have a favorite snack or drink that you're going to bring with you to the event?
You know, I am obsessed with coffee. I'm a coffee fiend, so long as I have my coffee, we're good.
Cool. I think I'd have a Sprite and maybe some popcorn.
Nice. That sounds wonderful.
Just classic. I never used to want to watch a movie with other people around. They'd always be talking and asking what's going on or whatever. And then I saw, I think it was Iron Man 2. And I'd never been around an audience that were all true fans of something already and loved it and cheered at the right time. And there was that connection that made me want to keep doing that, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I first started getting into audiences being active around a movie through Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was actually Janet in the New York City cast for 3 years. And I loved the audience participating. I loved that they not only knew the movie, but also interacted with the movie. And so since then, I think I just fell in love with having that experience, with having people be able to connect with the story and with the characters. And
last icebreaker, are you in a costume? Do you picture yourself in a costume when you're watching this movie? Do you dress up?
Ooh, I guess if I was going, yeah, I probably would. I don't know exactly who I would cosplay, but I might be, yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I've only ever sort of done that once. I admit, when the last Harry Potter came out, I had a wizard's hat, and I actually took the time to like cut out stars, and it was a blue hat, and I glued the stars all over it. Like I was a wizard, and I went and saw the movie.
That is so cool. I love that.
I had a good time. I had to take it off. I couldn't wear it while we were watching the movie, but I have zero regrets about it. Good. I think that should be every fan's experience, to get to cosplay while going to a movie at least once. So this first question in the interview, I figured I like to let everyone start off and kind of, talk about their passion. So I wanted to ask, why is it important to help people express their emotions, by discussing fictional characters?
I find that a lot of times people aren't taught to understand their emotional experiences. In fact, some people might have been shamed or rejected or scrutinized for having certain emotions, especially things like sadness or anxiety. And I think that as a result, people tend to either misunderstand their emotions or perceive them as somehow either bad or dangerous or something to be hidden or ashamed of. But when we look at a character, especially a character who's experiencing a similar emotion that we might have been going through, it not only creates an understanding of that emotion, it also destigmatizes that experience. It allows viewers to understand that that emotion is acceptable. It allows viewers to understand that they're not alone in that experience. And in some ways, it creates almost like a relationship with that character. We call these parasocial relationships. it means that as viewers, we might almost become friends with the character. And in seeing the way that the character, let's say Batman, for example, deals with grief and trauma, might teach us ways that we too might be able to cope with something difficult as well.
So I imagine that people listening to this, they're trying to get a feel for, like, how does it work? Could you sort of take us through an example of when superhero therapy would be useful and, like, what you might say to someone?
Sure. For example, a lot of times individuals might really shame themselves for having developed some kind of a mental health disorder. I specialize in working with folks with PTSD, so that's my specialty. And so a lot of individuals that I see might say something along the lines of, I feel like I'm a failure for developing PTSD, or I feel like I'm broken. And so then I bring up certain superheroes, right? Inevitably, superheroes like Superman come up because most people believe that Superman is truly invulnerable, right? He's kind of the epitome of this ultimate superpower. And so then I ask folks, well, does he have any kind of vulnerability, or is he truly invincible? And so, of course, people will say, well, yes, he's vulnerable to kryptonite. And then I might ask, well, does that make him any less of a superhero? And of course the answer is no, right? We love Superman and we love the fact that he has a vulnerability. If he had none, then it would probably be a lot more difficult to relate to him. And every single superhero and every single living hero too has had some kind of obstacles that they've had to overcome. And the way that it would come up in therapy is that we would look at the way that a particular character faced an obstacle of some kind, whether it's trauma, whether it's rejection, how they were able to cope with it, and learn from that experience so that that individual might then also have, using that heroic role model, find their own pathway to healing. For example, by telling their own trauma story, by helping other trauma survivors, or maybe by joining some kind of a community to help them cope.
So we've got a lot of psychologists and researchers who listen to the show. What research is there that examines the effectiveness of superhero therapy? Are there any particular findings by you or someone else that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are, unfortunately, this field is fairly new. It's fairly green. It's a little over a decade old. So there are some findings from the 80s, but most of the findings have been found in the last decade. So what we're finding through research related to parasocial relationships, or through research related to what's called social surrogacy, which means that characters take some kind of a surrogate role for the viewer, we're finding that individuals who connect with a particular fictional character might have an easier time processing rejection, loss, or heartbreak. For example, Derek and colleagues, I think in early 2000s, ran a couple of studies where they had folks think about a painful and traumatic experience, let's say of a loss or a heartbreak, and half of the individuals would then have to write about a meaningful character that they feel connected to, whereas the other half of the individuals would have to write about an academic achievement. That was the control group. And so folks in the experimental group who wrote about a beloved fictional character afterwards reported significant reductions in feelings of loneliness, rejection, and depression compared to folks who were in the control condition. And there have been other studies like it indicating that individuals who've been through something painful, such as PTSD or some kind of a traumatic experience, for example, are more likely to have an easier time relating to fictional characters, let's say in television shows, for example, than to people around them. So, for example, undergraduate students who are exposed to trauma are more likely to feel more connected to fictional characters than to their classmates. And so I think it was Gabriel and colleagues that ran that study. And so there are more studies that are being done right now. There are a couple of research studies being done with superhero therapy specifically. And so far we're finding promising results, but certainly the field is still very green. So I'm hoping there'll be more research done related to this topic.
You're listening to Psych Everywhere. Up next, we're going to talk about which superheroes you're the most likely to identify with. And we'll even talk about what it means to identify with characters who are the villains in a story. But first, real quick, I want to tell you a bit about Dr. Scarlet. Okay, really, because I've already told you a bit about her at the start of this episode, what I'd like to do is actually feature two of her recent works. So first of all, I've been listening to episodes of her podcast, which she co-hosts with Dustin McGinnis. The name of that show is Superhero Therapy Podcast. And if you're enjoying this episode, then I'm pretty sure that you're going to like that one as well. So in each episode, they analyze a recent major film or a popular character. Here's an example. I recently listened to this episode about the rise of Skywalker. I don't know if you've heard of that, right? So in that episode, they talked about the value of choice, which is, a really important theme for many characters in that particular film. So their show also includes these brief audio clips from the stories that they're referencing, and I think that's a lot of fun too. Another of Dr. Scarlet's recent works is her latest novel, Dark Agents, Book 1, Violet and the Trial of Trauma. This book, it's actually a graphic novel, so it's packed with a whole lot of really cool illustrations that are done by a separate artist. Basically, the story follows a character named Violet, whose parents are murdered by necromancers when she was a child. But what will really interest listeners of this podcast is that elements of evidence-based treatment, called acceptance and commitment therapy, are blended throughout the story. So you really get to be entertained and learn something too. This graphic novel is intended for teenage audiences, but really anyone can enjoy the story and information within. Okay, well, I'm sure you're excited to hear more from Dr. Scarlet, so let's get back to that interview.
So in your experience, how often are there connections to be drawn between a person and their favorite superhero? Does that usually happen, or do people connect with superheroes that aren't anything like them?
I think that the people I see anyway, I tend to see people who self-select to do this kind of therapy. But what I'm finding is that a lot of folks do end up identifying with some aspect of a particular character, whether it's a superhero, whether it's not a hero, whether it's, another individual, maybe another protagonist. But sometimes that could be an anti-hero or even a villain that they might have an identification with. And what I find is that a lot of times individuals might be really drawn to characters that might have shared a similar experience to them, as in the way of almost saying, hey, me too, I've been through that as well, as a way of feeling less alone and almost supported by that character.
So who are these superheroes that people tend to identify with? Are there some that you hear frequently?
Yeah, the ones I hear of most frequently are Batman. That one comes up a lot. The Hulk comes up a lot. Also fictional characters like Harry Potter, Hermione, Ron. Those come up a lot. Yeah, so there is quite a variety. And Spider-Man comes up a lot. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Those are probably the most frequent ones that I run into.
So I was going to ask about that. So characters like Darth Vader and Maleficent and Ursula, when people identify with the villains, could that say something about them? What does that mean?
I'm really glad you asked this question. I get this question a lot, especially when I'm presenting at conferences or when I talk to other providers or parents or teachers. And so the short answer is we do not have to worry about HI, homicidal ideation. So typically when I ask about what is it that individuals like about these characters, what I find is that individuals like that these characters have a certain aspect, for example, freedom, right? So Ursula, for example, has the freedom to be herself. She's also someone that is really body positive. She's somebody that is willing to go after what she wants. And whether it's her, whether it's Joker, whether it's Harley Quinn, a lot of individuals like villainous characters for that freedom of expression. So I've had a lot of folks who come in with very rigid schedules, with very rigid lifestyles, and then when they watch a villain like Joker, for example, doing whatever the heck he wants, that gives them almost a vicarious experience of freedom. And so in therapy, we work on certain ways that they can create a sense of freedom in their own lives. For example, having a game night, or taking a little bit of time off work to plan a vacation, or going to a comedy show in a way that would allow that individual to have a little bit of fun too. Other folks like villains because villains are not afraid to express themselves. So then they might benefit from learning assertive communication skills. A lot of folks who like Darth Vader might either like him, for example, because of his expression of power, or because of the way that he atones for some of the things that he's done. And so for a lot of, for example, inmates that I have not directly but indirectly worked with, having consulted on a program that was instituted in one of the local inmate facilities, we talked about this theme of redemption, where an individual can commit an act that might not be good in nature but might still be capable of redeeming themselves in remembering what they stand for, kind of like Darth Vader. And so finding a point of connection that the individual has with these characters can be very beneficial in aiming the therapy that they're working on.
Cool. So I was listening to your podcast this morning. I was listening to the episode about Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
You said some really positive things about Meg, who I thought was worse than the devil, who's also a character on that show. You talked about her loyalty and all these really surprising things that kind of impressed me and took my mind in a different direction. So obviously there's controversy about some stories that are out there, you know, particularly where like characters fail, like Walter White's kind of his like downward spiral on Breaking Bad, or the Joker's storyline. I know you understand more than pretty much anybody the power behind a fictional story. So do you think that some of these stories can actually be harmful to watch?
You know, that's a great question, and I think it's not a polar question. It's not an all or none kind of question, in that I think that whenever we watch something, we probably need to consider our own state of mind and our own mental health, right? So some folks, for example, report that whether it's the Joker movie or whether it's a show like 13 Reasons Why, are very helpful to them in helping them to understand either their own mental health or start certain conversation topics. On the other hand, certain individuals, especially when they're already going through a hard time, if they're being easily triggered and they're maybe experiencing psychological and physiological difficulties like adrenal fatigue and panic attacks, for example, might benefit from taking a little break from content like that. So it's not that I think that a particular story is harmful. It's that I think that we as viewers, or, you know, we as mental health providers who prescribe a viewing of some kind to our clients, need to be understanding about that person's state of mind in that time. Because even the most seemingly innocent story, you know, even like the Christmas Carol, for example, can be really triggering to someone who, for example, lost a child. So I think that it's not so much the content as the person's state of mind in that time period and a particular need that they might have that is what needs to be taken into account at that time.
So I have one more question that was on the list. I figured you might actually want to end off with this one. So superheroes, they all face struggle. That's consistent in pretty much any story. And I wondered if you wanted to talk about what's actually good about a struggle.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you so much for asking that. I think that a struggle is an origin story. A struggle is the beginning of an opportunity for our heroic journey. It's an opportunity to try something new, and inevitably a struggle is a learning experience. We gain wisdom, and I think at the core of our greatest struggle is the foundation of our greatest strength. It's when we realize what is it that we're made of and what we want to stand for.
Wow, okay. So I had always heard, that like revisiting a past significant and maybe tragic moment in your life, that can really help you to open up about yourself and learn and move forward. But I'd really never considered how fictional characters can actually do that too. And I just want to thank you so much for helping me to see that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for this interview.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you do. It is really inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I can't thank Dr. Scarlet enough for speaking with us tonight, and especially for being a hero to so many other people and for her efforts to help people learn about themselves in such a unique way. If you'd like to learn more about her work, I encourage you to go check out her Superhero Therapy podcast and Harry Potter Therapy podcast. It's on Apple Podcast or wherever you go to listen to podcasts. And of course, check out her graphic novel too, Dark Agents, on Amazon, or in this case, wherever you go to buy books. Did you enjoy this episode? If so, it would really mean a lot if you'd take 2 minutes to leave a review and just let us know how we're doing on the show. In an upcoming episode, I'd like to read those reviews too, so maybe you'll hear your own review on the show at some point. Okay everyone, that's all for now. I'll talk to you again soon. Copyright 2020, Psi Chi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.